The silver hulls of the ESS Defiant hummed with an energy that seemed almost alive, a stark contrast to the deathly silence that had fallen over Earth's combined defense fleet. Admiral Jangu stood at the bridge, his weathered face reflected in the reinforced viewscreen as he watched their meager force of 23 ships form up in lunar orbit. The sight would have been laughable if it wasn't so desperately tragic, humanity's last stand, barely mustering enough firepower to handle a pirate raid, let alone face down an alien empire. Status report, he called out, more from habit than necessity. The crew's tension was thick enough to cut with a plasma torch. Lieutenant Rodriguez's voice cracked slightly as she responded, all ships in formation, Admiral. The Valerian fleet will breach the Kuiper belt in approximately 6 hours. Wonderful, Jangu muttered, just enough time for a nice cup of tea and perhaps write my memoirs. How humanity got into this mess, a comedy of errors has a nice ring to it, don't you think? No one laughed. They rarely did these days. Jangu's mind drifted back to first contact day, just 18 months ago. The memory was crystal clear, humanity's collective jaw dropping as the massive Valerian warship materialized just beyond Mars' orbit. The ship itself looked like someone had taken every sci-fi designer's wet dream, thrown it in a blender, and hit pulverize, all sharp angles and gleaming purple-black metal, with enough weapon ports to make a military contractor weep with joy. But what followed wasn't the peaceful exchange humanity had hoped for. Instead, it became the beginning of a nightmare that would reshape human civilization forever. The initial transmission had been classic, "Greetings, primitive species. We are the Valerian Empire, masters of 8,000 star systems, controllers of the galactic core, and your new overlords. Please prepare for immediate integration into our glorious civilization." The United Nations response had been a masterclass in diplomatic restraint. They'd assembled their finest minds, politicians, scientists, artists, even celebrity chefs, because apparently someone thought the way to an alien's heart was through whatever they used for a stomach. The human delegation had prepared for months, crafting the perfect presentation showcasing Earth's achievements, quantum computing, fusion power, medical breakthroughs, and yes, even reality TV, though perhaps that hadn't been their finest moment. The Valerian ambassador, a towering figure with metallic blue skin and too many eyes, had watched it all with an expression that somehow managed to convey both boredom and contempt, despite being completely alien. When the presentation ended, he'd simply yawned, or what passed for a yawn when you had 3 mouths, and said, "Quaint. Now, about your immediate surrender." That's when things had gone sideways. The UN Security Council had politely suggested that perhaps the Valerians might consider a mutually beneficial trade agreement instead. The Valerians had countered by obliterating Madagascar as a demonstration of good faith. Their ultimatum had been simple: submit to Valerian rule within 1 Earth year or face extinction. They'd even been generous enough to provide a countdown clock, broadcasting it to every screen on the planet. The months that followed were a blur of frantic preparation. Humanity, faced with its own mortality, did what it had always done best: it adapted. Underground bunkers were constructed at a pace that would have made Cold War engineers jealous. Military installations sprouted like mushrooms across every continent. The world's armies, for the first time in history, truly united under a single banner. But it wasn't enough. It was never going to be enough. Dr. Sarah Chen, head of the newly formed Xenobiology Division, had been the first to realize just how outmatched they were. Her analysis of the Valerian technology showed they were dealing with a civilization thousands of years ahead of Earth. Their weapons could reshape matter at the quantum level. Their shields could withstand the force of a small sun. Their ships moved through spacetime like it was water. "We're not just fighting an advanced enemy," she had told the UN Security Council, "we're fighting a species that has mastered the fundamental forces of the universe." The response had been predictable. Increased military spending. Crash programs in weapons development. Desperate attempts to reverse engineer any piece of Valerian technology they could get their hands on. But it was like cavemen trying to build a nuclear reactor: they didn't even have the basic scientific framework to understand what they were looking at. The first real battle had come 3 months after the ultimatum. A Valerian scout ship had ventured too close to Earth's defensive perimeter, and an overeager captain had opened fire. The resulting skirmish had lasted exactly 6 minutes and 14 seconds. Earth lost 3 ships. The Valerian scout had suffered a minor scratch to its paint job. Now, 18 months later, humanity was down to its last cards. 23 ships against an empire that spanned thousands of light years. The odds made David versus Goliath look like a fair fight. But there was something the Valerians hadn't counted on, something that even humanity hadn't fully understood about itself until pushed to the absolute brink. It was hidden in their genes, in the very essence of what made humans human. Dr. Raina Martinez had discovered it in her underground lab on Ceres, though she didn't yet realize just how significant her finding would be. A knock on his cabin door pulled Jangu from his reverie. "Enter," he called out, not turning from the viewport where Earth hung like a brilliant blue jewel against the black velvet of space. Lieutenant Rodriguez stepped in, holding a data pad. "Sir, we're receiving strange readings from the outer system. The Valerian fleet, it's bigger than we thought." Jangu took the pad, his eyes widening as he scrolled through the data. Not hundreds of ships as they'd expected, but thousands. The Valerians weren't just sending a conquest fleet, they were sending an extermination force. "Well," he said, his voice steady despite the fear clutching at his heart, "I suppose we should cancel that tea party." He turned to his communications officer. "Send word to all ships. Battle stations. And get me a direct line to Dr. Martinez on Ceres. Something tells me we're going to need whatever she's been cooking up in that lab of hers." As the bridge erupted into activity, Jangu allowed himself one last look at Earth. If humanity was going to make its last stand, they were damn well going to make it count. The Valerians were about to learn that pushing humans into a corner was a very, very bad idea. Little did either side know, the real war was about to begin, and it would be unlike anything either species had ever imagined. Part 2, The Awakening. Dr. Raina Martinez's underground laboratory on Ceres hummed with an energy that had nothing to do with the machinery surrounding her. Her hands trembled as she reviewed the latest genetic data for the 5th time. The results remained the same, defying everything she thought she knew about human biology. "This can't be right," she muttered, but the evidence was undeniable. The survivors from Titan weren't just resistant to the Valerian bioweapons, they were adapting to them in real time, their DNA rewriting itself in ways that should have been impossible. The discovery had been purely accidental. After the Valerian attack on Titan that had claimed 3,000 lives, Martinez's team had been tasked with studying the few survivors, trying to understand how anyone had lived through exposure to the alien toxins. What they found changed everything they thought they knew about human potential. "Dr. Chen," she called out to her assistant. "Get me Admiral Jangu. Now." While waiting for the connection, Martinez pulled up the genetic sequences on the holographic display. The changes were beautiful in their complexity, human DNA literally learning from the attack, not over generations but in minutes. It wasn't just adaptation, it was evolution on fast forward. The holographic communication system crackled to life, revealing Admiral Jangu's tired face. "Doctor, we're a bit busy up here. The Valerian fleet is dash." "They've made a mistake," Martinez interrupted, unable to contain her excitement. "A massive one." Jangu's eyebrow raised slightly. "I'm listening." Martinez began uploading the genetic data to his system. "Every species we've encountered, including the Valerians, evolves through traditional natural selection. Slow, generational changes driven by environmental pressures. But humans, we're different. Our DNA doesn't just pass on traits, it learns. Doctor, there are thousands of Valerian ships bearing down on Earth. Please get to the point." "The point, Admiral, is that we've been looking at this all wrong. We've been trying to match their technology, their weapons. But our real advantage isn't in our ships or our guns, it's in our cells. She pulled up the data from the Titan survivors. Look at this. When exposed to Valerian bioweapons, the survivors' bodies didn't just develop resistance, they started producing compounds that could break down the alien toxins. Their immune systems learned from the attack and developed countermeasures in real time. Jangu leaned forward, his fatigue forgotten. Are you saying we can become immune to their weapons? Not just immune, Martinez's eyes gleamed. We can turn their weapons against them. But we need more data, more samples. And we need volunteers willing to undergo the procedure. What procedure? Martinez took a deep breath. We need to expose healthy humans to controlled doses of Valerian bioweapons. It's the only way to trigger the adaptation response. It's dangerous, possibly fatal, but Do it, Jangu interrupted. I'll send you volunteers within the hour. How many do you need? At least 50. And Admiral, they need to understand that this might kill them. Jangu's face hardened. Doctor, we're all dead anyway if this doesn't work. Do whatever you have to do. The next 48 hours in Martinez's lab were a blur of activity. Volunteers poured in, not 50, but hundreds. Marines, scientists, civilians, all willing to risk death for a chance at saving humanity. The testing process was brutal. Martinez had to watch as the first volunteers writhed in agony, their bodies fighting to adapt to the alien toxins. Some didn't make it. The first death nearly broke her, a young Marine named Rodriguez, no relation to the lieutenant. He died screaming, his body unable to adapt fast enough. But others survived, and with each survivor, the data grew more promising. By the third day, they had their first success. Sarah Chen, Martinez's assistant, had volunteered herself. Not only did she survive exposure to the Valerian toxins, but her body began producing antibodies that could neutralize them completely. It's working, Martinez whispered, staring at Chen's blood work. It's actually working. But the real breakthrough came from an unexpected source. One of the volunteers, a former genetic engineer named Dr. James Wong, didn't just survive the exposure, his body started producing something new. Something that could actually break down Valerian biotech at the molecular level. It's like our DNA looked at their weapons and said, "Nice try, but we can do better," Wong explained, still weak from the procedure but grinning like a madman. Martinez immediately called another conference with Jangu. This time, the Admiral wasn't alone, the holographic display showed the entire Earth Defense Council. We've done it, Martinez announced without preamble. We can now safely expose volunteers to Valerian bioweapons and trigger controlled adaptation. But there's more. She paused, making sure she had their full attention. We can synthesize these adaptations into a form that can be administered to others. In essence, we can share the immunity. The council chamber erupted in excited murmurs, but Jangu raised his hand for silence. How quickly can you scale this up? That's the best part, Martinez smiled. The adapted cells multiply exponentially. We can have enough doses for every human in the solar system within weeks. You have days, Jangu replied grimly. The Valerian fleet will reach Earth in less than a week. Martinez nodded. Then we'll do it in days. But Admiral, there's something else you need to know. These adaptations, they're not just defensive. Some of our volunteers are developing abilities we never expected. Enhanced strength, accelerated healing, even limited telepathic capabilities. It's like the human genome is awakening abilities that have been dormant for millennia. The council chamber fell silent. Finally, one of the council members spoke up. Are you saying we're evolving? No, Martinez replied. We're remembering. Something in our genetic code has been waiting for this moment, this catalyst. The Valerians didn't just wake a sleeping giant, they woke something inside us that we never knew existed. As if to emphasize her point, Dr. Chen chose that moment to demonstrate. Without warning, she lifted a 2-ton piece of laboratory equipment with one hand, her eyes glowing with an inner light that wasn't quite human anymore. "Well," Jangu said after a long moment of stunned silence, "I believe that changes our tactical options somewhat." The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. Martinez's lab worked around the clock, producing doses of what they now called the awakening serum. Military transports rushed the doses to every human settlement in the solar system. The transformation spread rapidly through the population, each person's genetic code responding slightly differently to the catalyst. Some developed enhanced strength or speed. Others found they could heal from injuries that should have been fatal. A few, like Dr. Chen, manifested abilities that seemed to defy the laws of physics entirely. But it wasn't without cost. The transformation was painful, and not everyone survived. Those who did emerge found themselves changed in ways that went beyond the physical. They could sense each other, feel a connection that transcended normal human consciousness. "We're becoming something new," Martinez wrote in her journal. "Not better, not worse, just different. The question is, will it be enough?" The answer would come sooner than anyone expected. The Valerian fleet was approaching faster than anticipated, and humanity's last stand was about to begin. But this time, they weren't just fighting for survival, they were fighting for the right to become something more than they had ever been. As Martinez watched the doses being loaded onto the last transport, she couldn't help but wonder, had the Valerians made a tactical error, or had they inadvertently fulfilled their role in humanity's next great leap forward? The answer would be written in the stars, in fire and blood and the light of evolving souls. The battle begins. The bridge of the ESS Defiant thrummed with new energy as Admiral Jangu watched the tactical display. The massive Valerian fleet was now visible to the naked eye, their purple-black ships blotting out the stars like a swarm of technological locusts. But unlike 18 hours ago, fear no longer permeated the air. Instead, there was something else: anticipation. Status of the fleet? Jangu asked, his own body still adjusting to the awakening serum. He could feel the changes coursing through him, synapses firing with new intensity, muscles coiled with strength that defied his 60 years. Lieutenant Rodriguez, her eyes now bearing a subtle golden glow, responded with crystalline clarity. "All 23 ships report ready, Admiral. Crew transformations are complete. We've lost 12 personnel who couldn't survive the change, but the rest." She paused, a slight smile playing on her lips. "The rest are something else entirely." Jangu nodded, feeling the strange new connection that linked him to every transformed human in the fleet. It wasn't quite telepathy, more like an awareness of shared consciousness, a battlefield network made of minds instead of quantum computers. "Put me through to all ships," he commanded. As the channel opened, he could feel the attention of thousands of transformed humans focusing on him. "This is Admiral Jangu. In approximately 2 hours, we will engage the largest alien fleet humanity has ever faced. They think they're here to exterminate a primitive species." He allowed himself a grim smile. "Let's show them how primitive we aren't." The response wasn't just heard through the comm systems, it was felt, a wave of determined agreement that rippled through the shared consciousness of the fleet. On the medical frigate HSS Nightingale, Dr. Martinez monitored the ongoing transformations with a mixture of awe and scientific fascination. The changes weren't stopping with the initial adaptation, they were continuing to evolve. Each hour brought new developments, new abilities manifesting across the transformed population. "Dr. Martinez." One of her assistants called out urgently. "You need to see this. It's the genetic samples from Beta Squadron." Martinez rushed to the analysis station, her eyes widening as she took in the data. The pilots of Beta Squadron, who had been among the first to receive the serum, were showing unprecedented neural adaptation. Their brains were developing new structures, allowing them to process information at speeds that should have been impossible. "They're not just flying their ships anymore," she murmured. They're becoming their ships. As if to confirm her observation, Beta Squadron launched from the Defiance Bay. Their fighters moved with impossible grace, pilots and machines functioning as single entities. The neural interfaces that had once required bulky hardware were now unnecessary. The transformed pilots could connect directly to their craft through thought alone. In the asteroid belt, the mining colonies that had once been humanity's most vulnerable outposts had become something else entirely. The miners, their bodies adapted to survive in near-vacuum conditions, had transformed their bases into living fortresses. Some had developed the ability to manipulate metal at a molecular level, reshaping the very asteroids they once tediously drilled. The Valerian fleet approached with the absolute confidence of a superior force about to crush an inferior opponent. Their formations were perfect, their tactics honed by millennia of successful conquests. Supreme Commander Zix watched the pitiful human fleet with all three of his eyes, mandibles clicking in anticipation of an easy victory. "Begin the standard bombardment pattern," he ordered. "Let's remind these primitives why resistance is futile." The first Valerian salvos lit up space like artificial suns, enough firepower to crack a small moon directed at Earth's defenders. In previous engagements, such an attack would have ended the battle before it began. But this time was different. Beta Squadron's fighters didn't just dodge the incoming fire, they danced through it, moving in ways that should have turned their pilots to paste. The larger human ships, instead of being vaporized, seemed to absorb the energy, their hulls glowing with borrowed power. "Impossible," Zix whispered, all three mouths moving in shocked synchronization. On the Defiance Bridge, Jangu felt the collective surprise of his transformed crew as they discovered new abilities in the heat of battle. Lieutenant Rodriguez's station erupted in sparks from a near miss, but instead of diving for cover, she reached out with her mind and pulled the electricity back, reshaping it into a stable form. "Sir," she reported calmly, "I think we can use their energy weapons against them. We're not just resistant, we can redirect them." Jangu nodded, already feeling the tactical possibilities through the fleet's shared consciousness. "All ships, new protocol, don't just evade their fire. Catch it. Return it. Show them what humanity can do with a little borrowed power." The space between the fleets became a dance of light and energy as transformed humans demonstrated abilities that bordered on the miraculous. Valerian energy weapons were caught, redirected, sometimes even absorbed and enhanced before being sent back at their origins. But the Valerians weren't masters of 8,000 star systems for nothing. They adapted their tactics, switching to physical projectiles and gravitational weapons. The battle evolved into something unprecedented. Two species, each pushing the boundaries of their capabilities, engaged in combat that resembled a force of nature more than a traditional military engagement. The first major breakthrough came from an unexpected quarter. A squad of transformed engineers aboard the HSS Hyperion discovered they could synchronize their consciousness to create quantum fields that disrupted Valerian shield harmonics. The information spread instantly through the fleet's shared awareness, and suddenly the seemingly invincible alien ships became vulnerable. The void filled with the silent thunder of battle as humanity's last stand became humanity's first real fight back. Ships were lost on both sides, but each human casualty seemed to strengthen the survivors' resolve, their shared consciousness absorbing and learning from each loss. In her lab aboard the Nightingale, Martinez monitored the ongoing transformations with growing excitement. The combat was accelerating the evolutionary process, each engagement pushing human adaptation further. She watched as gunners developed the ability to see quantum fluctuations, engineers learned to manipulate gravitational fields with their minds, and pilots achieved levels of neural integration with their ships that turned them into living weapons. "We're not just fighting them," she realized, recording her observations for posterity. "We're transcending our limitations because of them. Every attack they launch teaches us something new about ourselves." The battle raged for hours, defying traditional military logic. The vastly outnumbered human fleet shouldn't have lasted minutes against the Valerian armada. Instead, they were fighting them to a standstill, using abilities that blurred the line between technology and biology, science and miracle. But even with their newfound powers, humanity's defenders were slowly being pushed back. For every Valerian ship they destroyed, 3 more took its place. The transformed humans were extraordinary, but they weren't inexhaustible. As the battle entered its 6th hour, Admiral Jangu felt the strain in the fleet's shared consciousness. They were all evolving, all becoming something more than human, but they were also reaching their limits. Something had to change, and soon. That's when Dr. Martinez's voice cut through the combat chatter, her tone carrying an excitement that even the shared consciousness couldn't fully convey. "Admiral, we've found something. The Titan survivors, their adaptation hasn't stopped. They're showing signs of something new, something bigger than anything we've seen so far. I think this was just the beginning." Before Jangu could respond, proximity alarms screamed across the fleet. A new wave of Valerian ships was emerging from hyperspace, their weapons already charging. The real test of humanity's evolution was about to begin. Evolution's edge. The arrival of the second Valerian fleet should have been the end. With Earth's defenders already stretched to their limits, the appearance of thousands more enemy ships seemed like the final nail in humanity's coffin. But aboard the medical frigate HSS Nightingale, Dr. Raina Martinez was witnessing something that changed everything. "It's impossible," Dr. Chen whispered, her transformed eyes tracking quantum patterns in the genetic data streaming across their holographic displays. "The Titan survivors, their DNA isn't just adapting anymore. It's transcending," Martinez finished, watching as the genetic sequences before her rewrote themselves in patterns that defied conventional biology. The survivors from the first Valerian attack on Titan had progressed far beyond the initial transformations. Their genetic structure was approaching something that looked less like DNA and more like pure energy. "Get me Admiral Jangu," Martinez commanded, her fingers flying across the console as she compiled the data. "And prepare the isolation chamber. We need to see this in action." Aboard the ESS Defiant, Jangu was orchestrating a fighting retreat, trying to buy time against overwhelming odds. The shared consciousness of the transformed fleet rippled with determination and exhaustion in equal measure. They'd bloodied the Valerians' nose, destroyed hundreds of their ships, but it wasn't enough. The enemy's numbers were simply too great. "Admiral," Lieutenant Rodriguez called out, her voice cutting through the chaos of battle, "Dr. Martinez is requesting emergency priority communication." "Put her through," Jangu ordered, watching as another human destroyer sacrificed itself to protect Earth's orbital defenses. The crew's final thoughts echoed through the shared consciousness, not fear or regret, but a fierce pride in buying their people a few more precious minutes. Martinez's hologram appeared on the bridge, her expression a mixture of scientific excitement and urgency. "Admiral, we need you to get the Titan survivors to the Nightingale immediately. All of them. What's happening to them, it could change everything." "Doctor, in case you haven't noticed, we're a little busy trying not to get annihilated," Jangu responded, gripping his chair as the Defiant shuddered under enemy fire. "Trust me," Martinez insisted. "What's happening to them is more important than any battle. They're becoming something else, something beyond what we imagined possible. But we need them together to catalyze the process." Before Jangu could respond, a new voice cut through the shared consciousness, Sarah Chen, speaking directly into the minds of every transformed human in the fleet. "She's right. I can feel it. The Titan survivors, they're calling to each other. Something's building, something big." Jangu felt it too, now that he focused on it. Through the shared consciousness, he could sense the Titan survivors scattered throughout the fleet, their minds burning brighter than the others, pulling at each other like magnets trying to unite. "Do it," he ordered. "All ships, priority transport of Titan survivors to the Nightingale. Beta Squadron, provide escort. Everyone else, hold the line. Whatever's happening, we need to buy them time." The evacuation took precious minutes they could barely afford. The Valerian fleet pressed their advantage, their weapons tearing through space with renewed fury. But the transformed humans fought with desperate intensity, their shared consciousness allowing for coordination that bordered on precognition. Aboard the Nightingale, Martinez watched as the 27 surviving victims of the Titan attack were brought together in the ship's largest medical bay. The moment they were in proximity, the change became visible to everyone. Their bodies began to glow with an inner light that hurt to look at, their transformed DNA resonating in patterns that seemed to bend reality itself. "What's happening to them?" Jangu demanded through the holographic link. Martinez checked her instruments, though they were barely able to process what they were recording. "Remember how I said human DNA learns? Well, theirs hasn't stopped learning. They've been adapting continuously since the first attack, building towards something. And now, together, they're reaching critical mass." The light emanating from the Titan survivors grew stronger, and with it came something new in the shared consciousness, a vast, expanding awareness that dwarfed their previous connection. Through their combined perceptions, Martinez could feel the fabric of space-time itself, could see the quantum strings that held reality together. And she wasn't the only one. Across the fleet, transformed humans began to experience new levels of awareness as the Titan survivors' evolution catalyzed changes in them all. Gunners didn't just see enemy ships, they saw the probability waves of where those ships would be. Engineers didn't just understand their technology, they could feel the quantum possibilities in every circuit and power conduit. In the isolation chamber, the Titan survivors began to move in perfect synchronization, their bodies lifting off the ground as space itself seemed to bend around them. Through the shared consciousness, their voices spoke as one. "We understand now. This was always possible. We were always meant to be more." The chamber erupted with energy that defied classification. It wasn't electromagnetic, wasn't nuclear, wasn't anything human science had words to describe. It was pure potential given form, the power to reshape reality channeled through human consciousness. The effect rippled through the transformed population like a wave, awakening similar potential in everyone it touched. Across the fleet, humans began to transcend their physical forms, becoming beings of energy and thought who simply chose to maintain human shape. Supreme Commander Zix, watching from his flagship, was the first to realize the true magnitude of what was happening. "All ships, full assault. Stop them before." But it was too late. The Titan survivors, now fully transformed, reached out not with weapons but with pure consciousness. Space folded around the Valerian ships, probability itself rewoven to serve human will. Entire squadrons of alien vessels found themselves traversing paths that should have been physically impossible, their weapons firing into void that suddenly wasn't where it had been. Through the shared consciousness, Martinez understood what she was seeing. The transformed humans weren't just fighting the Valerians, they were rewriting the rules of what was possible. The laws of physics weren't being broken, they were being transcended by consciousness that had evolved beyond the need for such limitations. "My God," she whispered, watching as reality itself seemed to dance to human will, "we're not just adapting to them. We're adapting to existence itself." The battle transformed from a military engagement into something else entirely, a clash between two fundamentally different ways of existing. The Valerians, for all their technological might, were still bound by the physical laws they had mastered. The transformed humans were becoming beings who saw those laws as mere suggestions. But even as humanity approached this new level of existence, Martinez noticed something crucial in her readings. The transformation wasn't stable, wasn't complete. They were balanced on the edge of something even greater, a precipice of evolution that could either lift them to unprecedented heights or destroy them completely. As space warped and twisted around the battling fleets, as transformed humans rewrote the rules of reality with pure thought, Martinez realized they had hours at most before this new evolution either stabilized or burned itself out. The question was, what would humanity become in those final hours? And would it be enough to save them from the still overwhelming Valerian force? The answer, she suspected, would reshape not just this battle, but the very nature of human existence. And through the shared consciousness, she felt the Titan survivors' response. They were about to find out. The New Dawn. The universe, Dr. Reina Martinez had once believed, operated according to fixed laws. But as she watched reality bend and twist around the transformed Titan survivors, she understood that those laws were more like guidelines, suggestions that could be rewritten by sufficiently evolved consciousness. The battle above Earth had become something beyond war, beyond physics, beyond the comprehension of any unmodified human mind. The Valerian fleet, for all its technological superiority, found itself fighting an enemy that didn't just break the rules, they rewrote them. But time was running out. The transformations are becoming unstable, Martinez announced through the shared consciousness, her instruments showing critical fluctuations in the energy patterns of the transformed humans. We have maybe 2 hours before the changes either stabilize or... She didn't need to finish the thought. Everyone connected to the shared consciousness could feel it, the burning sensation of their own evolution threatening to consume them from within. Admiral Jangu, his own form now more energy than matter, processed this information across quantum frequencies. Then we end this in 2 hours. The Titan survivors, floating in their chamber aboard the Nightingale, had become beings of pure light and thought. Through them, the shared consciousness evolved further, expanding beyond individual minds to encompass something greater. They weren't just connected anymore, they were becoming a new form of collective existence, each individual maintaining their identity while participating in something vast and unprecedented. Supreme Commander Zix, watching from his flagship as reality itself turned against his forces, finally understood what his empire had awakened. All ships, he transmitted, execute final protocol. If we cannot have this system, no one will. The Valerian fleet began to shift, their ships moving into a formation that Martinez recognized from her analysis of their technology. They're preparing for a synchronized quantum detonation, she announced. If they succeed, they'll tear apart the fabric of spacetime itself. Earth, the solar system, everything within a light year will be reduced to subatomic particles. But even as she spoke, something new was emerging from the transformed human collective. The Titan survivors, their consciousness now expanded beyond normal spacetime, saw not just what was, but what could be. Through the shared awareness, they shared their vision. We see it now, their combined voices echoed through every transformed mind. The path forward. Not just for survival, but for transcendence. But we must all choose it. Together. Through their expanded perception, they showed what they meant. A new way of existing, not as purely physical beings, nor as pure energy, but as something in between, consciousness that could shape reality while remaining connected to it. But achieving it would require every transformed human to synchronize perfectly, to make the same leap at the same moment. If we fail, Martinez warned, if even one of us hesitates. We don't fail, Jangu interrupted, his voice carrying the weight of command even through the shared consciousness. We can't fail. Not just for ourselves, but for every human who died to get us here, and every human counting on us to succeed. The Valerian ships began their final countdown, their quantum cores pulsing with enough power to unravel reality itself. In that moment, through the shared consciousness, every transformed human saw the choice before them. They could try to fight the Valerians conventionally and certainly lose. They could attempt to flee, to preserve what they had become, abandoning Earth and its untransformed population. Or they could attempt something that had never been done before, a synchronized evolution of an entire species. The choice, in the end, wasn't really a choice at all. As the Valerian fleet initiated their quantum detonation, every transformed human, from the Titan survivors to the newest adaptations, reached for the next level of existence. Their combined consciousness expanded beyond normal spacetime, beyond the limitations of matter and energy, into a realm where thought itself shaped reality. The universe seemed to hold its breath. Then, in a moment that defied description, humanity transcended. The quantum detonation that should have destroyed the solar system met something it couldn't destroy, a field of evolved consciousness that didn't just resist the laws of physics but rewrote them. The transformed humans, now existing as beings of pure quantum potential, caught the detonation like a wave and shaped it, redirected it, transformed it. Supreme Commander Zix watched in disbelief as the power that should have annihilated his enemies instead became part of them. The transformed humans didn't just survive the quantum detonation, they used it as a catalyst for their final evolution. Where there had been individual ships crewed by transformed humans, there was now a singular existence, a quantum field of conscious energy that maintained human form by choice rather than necessity. They had become beings who could shift between energy and matter at will, who could perceive and manipulate the fundamental forces of the universe through pure thought. What are you? Zix transmitted, all three of his mouths moving in synchronized horror. The response came not in words but in pure understanding, transmitted directly into the minds of every Valerian: we are what you made us. We are humanity transcendent. We are what happens when you push a species past its breaking point, we break through. The remaining Valerian ships attempted to retreat, to escape what they had created. But space itself refused to cooperate, shaped by the will of the transformed humans. Reality twisted, probability collapsed, and the mighty Valerian fleet found itself trapped by forces it couldn't begin to comprehend. You came to judge whether we were worthy of existence, the collective human consciousness transmitted. You forced us to prove ourselves. Consider us proven. What followed wasn't destruction but transformation. The transformed humans, now masters of quantum reality, didn't destroy the Valerian fleet. Instead, they rewrote its very existence, transforming weapons into tools, warships into vessels of exploration. It wasn't mercy, it was evolution enforced by beings who had transcended the need for revenge. In the aftermath, as the transformed humans helped their unchanged brethren understand what had happened, Dr. Martinez recorded one final entry in her log. Today marks not the end of humanity, but its beginning. We have become something new, something that can exist across multiple states of reality, something that can shape the universe through pure consciousness. But more importantly, we have maintained our humanity through the transformation. We still love, still hope, still dream. We are still human, just human plus ultra. The Valerians came to end our existence. Instead, they became the catalyst for our transcendence. Now we face a new challenge, helping the rest of humanity join us in this new state of existence, while ensuring we never become what the Valerians were, beings who thought power gave them the right to judge who should exist and who shouldn't. We have become gods, but we choose to remain human. That, perhaps, is our greatest evolution of all. Above Earth, the transformed fleet hung like a constellation of living stars, their consciousness spanning the gap between matter and energy, between what was and what could be. They had not just survived, they had become something new, something that could ensure humanity's survival not just against the Valerians, but against any threat the universe might pose. The war was over. The next stage of human existence was about to begin. And somewhere, in the quantum realm between thought and reality, Admiral Jangu finally got his cup of tea.